I am so thrilled to be able to welcome you to our very special guest, Yasmin Boland from Moonology. Welcome, Yasmin. So good to have you here.
Thanks, Brigit.
It's such a treat because if you don't know Yasmin, Yasmin is the founder of Moonology. She's a Hay House author like many times. She's created the book Moonology. She's created, there's a new one coming out, 3 oracle decks around Moonology. There's Moonology Manifesting, there's the Moonology Oracle, and then Yasmin, you've also got the Moonology Messages, which is, you'll see it here first because it's just about to come out. It looks gorgeous. And actually, I came across Yasmin's work a few years ago when I read the Moonology book, and I was just fascinated by the lunar cycles. So I knew a little bit about lunar cycles. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. And what I loved about Yasmin's work was that it was also integrating the signs, the different signs that the new moon and the full moon are in, the different signs, and how that can kind of integrate with the energy of those moon cycles. So no doubt we're going to hear a little bit more about that. But first, Yasmin, I want to just hear a little bit about your background, what got you into this kind of work and what led you to where you are now.
So it's been an unexpected journey. I actually, just for the record, I grew up in Tassie and I became a journalist. If anybody is here is from Tasmania, I became a journalist at the Examiner newspaper, which is the Launceston daily paper there. And so I became a journalist. I moved to London and I had absolutely no intention of working with the moon or anything. I was always interested in slightly cosmic things. I was quite cynical as well as a journalist. I made fun of a few things over the years. And basically what happened was I lived in London for a few years, worked as a journalist, went back to Australia, and journalism just kind of went down the tube at that point and it just became very scuzzy. Not why I started. And I became a journalist because I love to write. And at that point, I started meditating. And then as soon as I started meditating, my whole life changed. And I basically gave up journalism and started writing about the very things I had once made fun of, like St. John's wort and, meditation and all that sort of stuff. And then I got into astrology, and then I did that for about, 3 or 4 years. And I just thought, I just want to write astrology columns. So I started just telling everybody that I knew, I really want to write to the astrology columns. I really want to write to the astrology columns, in a kind of a putting it out there into the universe kind of way. And then at that point, I got my first column. I actually got it on a magazine here in England called Closer, which Jonathan Kainer, if you remember Jonathan, he mentored me a fair bit along the way. And he was offered this column and he couldn't do it. He turned it down. He said, but give it to my mate, Yasmin. So I got my first column and I still have that column like 25 years later nearly. And it just sort of took over. And long story short, I'd worked with the moon for a long time. If anybody out there knows anything about astrology, I have my moon conjunct my MC, which is basically astrology speak for you will write a book called Moonology if you're a writer. The moon is just really hard-coded, hardwired into my chart. And eventually I did write a book for Hay House, and that was, I never can remember when it was. I think it was about 2016, and called Moonology, and it's this one. We are actually about to relaunch it, do a sort of a new version, a new format. And it's still in the Amazon astrology bestsellers like 7-8 years later, which is incredible. Awesome. It's usually it's amazing, in the top 5 or 10. Then I wrote some cards. So these are my first deck of cards. They were the Moonology cards. But these became the best-selling oracle cards in the world. And as far as I know, they are the best-selling oracle cards in the history of oracle cards.
That's awesome. Congratulations. I love it.
Thank you. So that was really like crazy, wild, unexpected. And I've just kept going from there, and it's all good. And I love it. I love what I do. And, I just feel really lucky to do it. I personally feel that what I'm doing, which we can get into, but it's basically about working with the lunar cycle. And I was raised a Catholic, So I was raised, anything like this was really, my mother used to say, she probably still does, I don't know. There's this fine line between this sort of thing and madness. So I kind of grew up thinking, oh, better be careful with all that sort of stuff. But then actually at some point along this journey, just before I kind of started really getting into it, I realized that what I'm doing is actually something that women have done for literally thousands and thousands of years. And I just didn't know. I just knew that I was doing it and I wanted to do it and I knew it was working. It's really about setting intentions and, so that's basically me, my work self anyway, in a nutshell.
Yes. I know. I think just there, I think you've touched on something that maybe, a few of us are experiencing. I know I experience it where it's almost like a deep remembering, a sacred awakening of knowledge that we've probably attained throughout different lifetimes and in different, locations and different experiences and so on. And in this lifetime, we're kind of accessing this and being lit up by it. So it's beautiful
Yeah.
to see how you've connected with it and you've kind of heeded that call.
Yeah. I have to tell you actually, Brigit, because tarot, I got my first deck of tarot in about 2004. I'd always sort of shied away from them a bit. And I got a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Either someone gave it to me in Paris or I bought it. It's French. I still got it. It's over on the shelf. It's actually French. So all the writing's in French. It's really nice. But I remember really strongly just flicking through the deck once and then just sort of feeling like, oh, I understand those cards now. I remember them almost. Yeah. And I remember how fast I learned to read them. And I remember people saying to me, but how long have you been doing this? And I was like, not long. I said, but it's literally like I'm remembering these cards.
Yes, it's beautiful. I love it. And, the other thing I really appreciate about your work, Yasmin, and I remember this when I was reading Moonology, is just that you can take rich, complex topics, which is the moon and the cycles and the different signs and so on, and you bring it into such a beautiful, practical kind of space, which just like that resonates with me because I love doing that with tarot as well. And I think that is a gift to the world to be able to have this kind of entry point to start discovering natural cycles and the magic that is available to all of us. I think you do a wonderful job of bringing that into the everyday and the practical state. Yeah.
That's probably the ex-journalist in me,
Yeah. And I think that's why it's always interesting to understand the backstory, because sometimes when we have, whatever, oftentimes I see people have the career beforehand and then the kind of the awakened moment and then they step into this type of path.
Yeah, well, that was definitely me. I remember when I was very early 20s, I used to choose between two Australian magazines. One was called Cosmopolitan, which wasn't Australian, but we had Australian Cosmopolitan, and our local one, which was Clio, if you remember Clio. And I used to choose which one I would buy based on the horoscopes. But apart from that, I was never really that woo. It was the meditation that changed everything.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so just experiencing meditation was kind of your entry point into this world.
Yeah, totally. I learned to meditate in Sydney with this quite wild woman who was already in about her 80s, I think, then. And I always say it was the best $200 I ever spent.
Fantastic. I love those things that might seem quite insignificant at the time, but then you go and have the experience like, oh, it's like stepping into this whole entire new world, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about moon cycles, because that's what you are known for. Tell me, just give us an overview, like kind of the beginner's guide to lunar cycles, and then we can start to dive into a little bit more of the next layer around having the moon cycles in different signs and how we work with those. So share with us about lunar cycles.
All right. So the way I come at the lunar cycle in Moonology is that in astrology, it's taught us something. I remember being told by one of my first astrology mentors, oh, it's quite complicated, so don't worry about it for now. And that was kind of a red rag to a bull to me, because I was like, okay, well, that sounds interesting. Tell me more. But what I've done in Moonology is I really tried to strip it back so that, for one thing, you don't need to know astrology, and you don't even need to believe in astrology. So if you look at the moon cycle, if you're just starting, if this is the first time you've ever contemplated the moon cycle, then the first thing to know is that it's a monthly cycle. And indeed, the word moon and month, I'm pretty sure the word month comes from the word moon. And it used to be in Old English, moonth, Moonth. So it comes from the moon. And so the cycle you can split into two halves. There's the waxing cycle and the waning cycle. And the waxing cycle is effectively what you need to, the time where you really need to chase your goals, to really, whatever it is that you want in life, start to really go for it in the waxing cycle, which is between the new moon and the full moon. And then in the waning cycle, that's when you want to sort of let it all go, offer it up to the divine. And I'm just trying to see where we are. We're at 16 degrees of Taurus with the moon right now in the waning cycle. So it's when you want to offer it all up to the divine and just let go and just be and get in touch with your feminine power and prepare for the dark moon and that kind of thing.
Yeah, beautiful. And so how does the astrology overlay then with the full moon, new moon, and full lunar cycles?
So in a really weird way, and I actually don't think I've ever thought of this before. I've definitely never said it out loud, but in a way, Moonology, or the study of the moon, which is what women have traditionally done for literally millennia, is could be almost outside of astrology. Astrology is very much about the planets and it's about the sun and the moon a bit, but it's really like the big headline grabbers are always Saturn and Jupiter and so on and so forth. And Moonology was always practiced more by women, off in their cottages making tinctures and potions, while the very big important men wrote all the books and so on about astrology. So before we get onto the signs, I'd almost say, do you want to just talk about the 9 phases? And then we can talk about the moon through the signs, but you almost want to understand that. So I like to say the whole cycle, which is the monthly cycle. Then you've got the waxing cycle and the waning cycle. So, they're 2 weeks each. And then within that, you've actually got 8 astrological phases and 1 non-astrological phase, but one that I use and more women around the world use. It's a very powerful and the whole moon cycle is feminine, but it's a very feminine part of the cycle. So you get the new moon, which is when the sun and the moon are on the exact same zodiac degree. It's a zodiacal degree. And then you get the waxing crescent moon, which is just a few days later. And that's so at the new moon, you can't see the moon, but that's when you set your intentions, make your wishes. Then you get the crescent moon, which is when the moon, a sliver, starts to appear again after having disappeared with the new moon, which is when you start to put your foot down in terms of chasing your goals, whatever it is you're after. And then about a week after the new moon, you get the first quarter moon, which is when the sun and the moon are actually at a hard angle, 90 degrees from each other. And that's when challenges will traditionally come up. You'll find you set your intentions, but are you going to keep to them? Are you serious about what you say you want? Things like that, where you have to kind of get over a few obstacles and hurdles. Then we get the gibbous moon, which gibbous actually means bulging. And it's like the moon is now bulging with the intentions that you set and the action that you've made and the obstacles you've overcome and your desire to manifest this thing into reality. And that's the gibbous moon. And that's the last phase before the full moon, which is very much the sort of emotional explosion time. It's when push comes to shove. It's when the rubber meets the road. It's when you see if your manifesting has worked or not. It's when everyone's emotions come up. And so what I actually do at the full moon in Moonology, so I make the wishes at new moon, and then at full moon, I do release ceremonies. And it's something I highly recommend to anyone who wants to start to work with the moon. Just do the new moon intentions and then do the full moon release work. Because people, especially when they're into things like tarot and oracle cards and the moon and, magic and chakras and all that stuff, any of that stuff, they tend to get very excited, if I may say, about the new moon intention and the setting intentions and making wishes and sending wishes out into the universe and all that feels like the fun stuff. But what I found in my manifesting experience is that, and I've got 20 years of it, or 25 now, is that it's really the full moon work is just as important, if not more important.
What does it look like to do the release work? What does that actually mean?
So what I do is I do a fire ceremony, just because it's so good to just write things down and put that paper in the fire and, you let go of stuff. I mean, some people might do EFT, tapping. I do a bit of chanting as well, just to kind of as a part of my full moon ceremonies, which I basically do on Facebook and Instagram. And so what you're really doing there is in my parlance, I'm surrendering to the divine. I'm offering it up to the universe. I'm giving it to Goddess, to say, this is what I want. If it hasn't manifested, I hand it back to you and, let me know what to do next. So, and I feel like it was something I spent quite a fair bit of time in India at one point, and at a particular ashram in southern India called the Sri Narayani Peetham. And I really learned about surrender there. And when I was writing Moonology, the book, I knew that I wanted to do intention setting because I'd done a lot of intention setting myself and I'd seen that it was working at new moon. And then I'd found out about witches and, people, women just doing that thousands of years. I was like, okay, well, this is really interesting because it's not just something that I've read about or somehow come up with or whatever. But then when I went to India, would have been about 18, 20 years ago, it really added a new dimension. It just made me realize that, for one thing, I already knew this, that we're all manifesting 24/7 anyway. So whether you decide, okay, it's new moon, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do my new moon wishes and, Bob will be my uncle, or you don't, you're still manifesting. But the whole point with the new moon intentions is when magical women have traditionally decided to, send their wishes out to the universe, cast their spells or whatever, it was always the time to do it, for one thing. For another thing, it really focuses your mind. It helps you think, well, what do I actually want to manifest at the moment? Not just like bumbling through life and, never sort of getting really clear on what you want or anything like that. And I know you said most of your community are in America, but for the Australians who are listening, I don't know who the American equivalent would be. In England, it would probably be Judy, whose surname I can't remember, but Judy and Richard. In America, at a push, Barbara Walters, but not really as sophisticated because she's much more down to earth, whereas Barbara Walters was always very... Anyway, I digress. A woman called Carrie-Anne Kennelly said to me, the really good thing about what you're doing, Yasmin, is it doesn't matter if you believe in astrology or not, because if you sit down once a month and decide what you want and you write it out and you set some intentions and you work out some action points on what you're going to do in order to make these wishes come true, you're going to be good. It's going to be good. And so Carrie-Anne Kennelly said that to me. Not quite Barbara Walters, but you know what I mean. And I think she was right. And I know it works and it's great. But then you've got the thing of sometimes it's not right for you. Sometimes it's actually not what you need. And the release work in some weird way is like the secret sauce, SOURCE. It's like somehow to make the manifesting work, you have to be prepared to surrender it. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant about Carrie-Anne Kennelly and God knows what else.
No, I think this is really important because I think sometimes this thing that people can struggle with, 28, 29-day moon cycle is like, well, I haven't manifested all my goals. How am I going to manifest my dream house in 2 weeks? That's not going to work. But what you're saying is it's not about kind of the start finish of a goal, but this is more about an ongoing process and that we're being engaged in the process and the way of manifesting And that practice, maybe it's even more a practice that, every 2 weeks we're either in a getting clear on what we want, or we're in a liberating, releasing the things that are not serving us in achieving the thing that we want. And that in itself is a process that's so valuable.
And there's, the thing is as well is that, one thing that's really worked well for me is that Hay House asked me, my publishers asked me to do these ceremonies on Facebook, because it's very easy to just let the time go. And it's like, oh, it's a full moon, I should do a full moon ceremony. And then, life happens and you don't do it. But what's been great for me is having this commitment to Hay House and to my readers to do it has really, for quite a few years now, it really has shown me the power of it. And it's really, you might think, how can a 20-minute, half an hour ceremony at new moon and full moon be life-changing? But it is, because we just don't, for one thing, we don't realize how powerful we are. And for another, we don't use our powers. And just to this point about, how can I manifest a new house in 2 weeks? So really crucial thing that I do teach all the time is to go in baby steps. So, like just say you want to manifest a new house, then one of your first steps will be to go online, bring up 5 real estate agents, decide exactly where you want to live. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not, I'm going to magically make this house appear in 5 minutes. In what the example I always use, and it's actually in Moonology, the book, is just say if you would like, and some people get offended by this example because it's materialistic. So if you rather put it in your head, to meet your right spiritual teacher or whatever, that's fine with me. But it's a very easy, simple visual to give people. Just say what you actually want is a bright red convertible Mercedes, and what you have now is no transport whatsoever. So there are plenty of baby steps on the way from zero to your shiny, brand new, spanking Mercedes in the driveway convertible. And the first thing might be you need to manifest just an old bike, an old secondhand bike, and that's going to be, and the thing is, when you go in baby steps and you go, oh my God, I manifested a secondhand bike. You're like, oh my God, I can do this. And then you want to maybe get that to a slightly better bike. And then you might want to go to a very old secondhand car, and then you want to manifest a newer car, and then you might want to manifest eventually a secondhand Mercedes, and then you might manifest your dream car. So the thing is to be aware of is that as you see what you're manifesting, if you don't already, and I don't know, maybe I'm a bit stuck in the past, maybe everybody knows this now, but I still think there's a lot of people who haven't realized we have the powers to do this. And you start to go, oh my God, this stuff actually works. This is incredible. And I mean, I do, I was talking to, not to name drop, but she's a wonderful person, Colette Barron Reed, for anyone who knows her. She's a very big Hay House author and lovely woman. And I was talking to her the other day, and it was interesting because I was sort of going through a phase where I was like, oh, I try not to be too excited when this stuff works now because I've been teaching it for so long. I shouldn't be surprised when it happens again. And she was like, oh, no, Yasmin, I just think we just have to celebrate it every time it works. And I'm amazed. And, there you go.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I want to talk a little bit about how tarot cards and oracle cards can actually support this process, because I know for our community, we're all thinking about, oh, okay, yeah, so what does it look like in the release phase? How could I use my cards there? And of course, you've got your Moonology cards. So talk to me a little bit about how you see those working together.
So I think the most important thing with oracle cards and tarot cards is to understand that I see them almost like, if you've got your third eye here, they're like a movie coming out of your third eye. It's what you're actually manifesting.
Love it.
And so what I do is I always use them at the new moon, the full moon. So when I set my intentions, then I'll take a card and I'll think, okay, so, I've said I want to manifest this bright, shiny Mercedes. How am I going with that manifestation? Am I on track? What do I need to know? I mean, if I were to take, shall I just do a random?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'll just do a random card. So just say, I'm tired. Oops, here it just jumped out actually. What have I got here? Okay, so just say if that card came up. So that's it's time to take action card. So, I would think, okay, so in terms of my, Mercedes, I've got to take action. I'm at the start of the cycle line. I know these cards off by heart. So I know that card basically says you're at the start of your new cycle. And, I would use it like that as a kind of a message about what I need to do in order to do the manifesting that I want to do. And at the full moon, the same. What do I need to know about whatever it is that I'm releasing? Because sometimes, on the ceremonies I do, people will be releasing, bad stuff that happened to them, jealousy, resentment, hurt, heartbreak, job problems, all that. So they set the intention to do this release work, and then we take a card. And, what does the card tell you? Does it say, you might get a card that says, well, there's too much fear in the situation. And, until you start to release that fear, you're not going to be able to release any of it. So you can kind of use the cards almost as a way to check in with yourself, to see how on target you are with what you say you want.
Yes. Because it really is like it's our subconscious speaking to us and bringing the subconscious into the conscious. And oftentimes we have stuff that's stored in there that we're not really aware of. And I love, the power of being able to work with tarot and oracle in such a way that we're accessing what's happening in the subconscious, because it affects us no matter what. And is it a positive effector or is it a negative effector, like our fears and our doubts? And so the cards can really help us connect to that. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. So tell me.
We didn't finish the lunar cycle, by the way, Brigit. Do you want to finish that?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. So after the full moon, we actually have a couple more phases because there's 8 phases astrologically. But we get the disseminating moon, which is when we're supposed to just sort of release everything, share what we've learned. And if you think of someone sowing seeds, throwing the seeds into the air, it's put your ideas out there and just let it all go. And then after the disseminating moon, we get the 3rd quarter moon, which is again when challenges can come up. So it can be about how much have you made peace with what you need to make peace with and so on. Then we get the balsamic moon. Balsamic is like the vinegar, but it actually means healing and soothing. So it's all about healing and soothing any upsets and dramas that have been going on. And then finally, that's the last of the 8 astrological phases. But I also work with a 9th non-astrological phase, which is quite more witchy and really, which is the dark moon, and which is the end of the cycle before the new moon. It's when everything's very bright and dark, and it was traditionally a very feared time because you can't see the moon. But it's the time to really get rid of any negative energy you've got before you start to then go off till we get to the new moon, because at the new moon, obviously you want to be as clear as you can be, not putting out bad, negative stuff into the universe, just putting out all your light, your radiance.
Yes. And it is such a beautiful cycle because it's so important that we release fear and doubt before we set intentions. Because if you're holding the energy of fear and doubt, your intentions are probably going to be placed small or influenced by, they're not in that full alignment of your highest potential and your higher self, are they? So that whole releasing phase is critical to the whole intention, goal setting, and so on.
You've got it.
Yeah, and they work in tandem, right? You've got it, because
they do.
Just as you start setting those intentions, then no doubt all the negative self-talk starts happening as well. Oh, I'm actually going to get there. Is it enough? Blah, blah, blah. So great. You've got another
so true
to release that. Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, another Hay House author, one of the great things about being a Hay House author is you meet all the other Hay House authors. But there's another amazing Hay House author called Sonia Choquette, who plenty of you will know. And I remember we had a big session together once. And I remember we were talking about manifesting, and she said, self-doubt is the biggest manifestation killer. And I've never forgotten that. It's really so true that self-doubt kills you manifesting. So that's why you have to. So one thing I don't think I really mentioned while we've been talking is at the full moon, we do a lot of forgiveness work. We call it the F word. because people don't want to forgive and they want to stay angry, and being angry is better than being in despair. But being angry is also, as Buddha said, like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But we also need to forgive ourselves as well. And, that's where that's another reason why it's so powerful. Forgiveness in terms of, basically living your best life is because you forgive others, but you also forgive yourself. And if you don't forgive yourself for whatever it is you think you've done wrong, then what's going to happen? You're going to think you're not worthy. And then if you think you're not worthy, you're not going to manifest anything because you won't think you're worthy of it. So that's why it's all tied up. And we do the full moon forgiveness work at full moon, largely because of the time I spent in India, where they do a lot of full moon ceremonies. That was one of the reasons. But also it makes sense because what happens at the full moon, we all know the moon is about emotions. As the moon swells, so do our emotions. And then at the time of the full moon, everybody has all their emotional explosions. And it's the easiest time to access our feelings.
And intuition, no doubt.
And our intuition. Well, the moon's always about intuition. And in fact, my new cards are all about intuition. But I didn't mean for that to happen. It just happened. It just was obvious to me when I finished them. I was like, oh my God, they're all about intuition. And the moon is all about intuition.
Yes. Well, actually, let's talk about your new cards because they look gorgeous. And I'd love to hear about how are these different to, say, the Oracle cards, the manifestation deck.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more.
Okay. So the first deck, someone was just saying, does the deck go through all the signs and so on? It does. So, for example, that's the new moon in Virgo, which is a time to give rather than receive. Or you might get full moon, surrender to the divine. Or you might get the waxing moon, the energy is gaining momentum and so on. So that was the first deck. The manifestation deck, I don't have on my desk right now, actually, but they're all about manifesting. So they basically tell you, yes, thank you. So they basically tell you how to manifest. And they're a really super powerful deck. And in some ways, I feel like I haven't used them to their maximum capacity yet. I've got more work I need to do with them. But they're basically, they tell you what you're currently manifesting, and they give you many rituals to do, basically working with either goddesses, crystals, affirmations, and I've done all sorts of things to manifest. If you want to manifest something, this is what you're currently manifesting. And if you want to turn that around, this is what you need to do. So they're really good. And then these are completely different again. These cards started as a conversation between me and Colette Barron Reed, as I mentioned before. And so Colette and I were talking, and she was really wanting to do more work with the moon. And she was like, what about if we do a deck together? And I'm like, sure, why not? That'd be amazing to do. And so we started to talk about it. But because she's not an astrologer, she came at it from a completely different angle. And I was like, oh, God, okay. It's like, let's do it, in a slightly different way. So it's not just about the phases. So we kind of workshopped it. And in the end, our schedules did not align to do it. She said, Yasmin, you are the moon girl. You do them. So I said, amazing. We probably only worked out, I don't know, maybe 5 cards we'd sort of talked about. But what we've done is or what I've done, ultimately I've used moon symbols, lunar symbols. So let me give you a few. So, for example, Moonlight Serenade, okay, which means change your tune. So the card will relate to, stop banging on about same old. If you want to, if you want what you want. The dark moon, that's a bit more. Well, but this other beautiful. Here's another one, very much a symbol. Moon dance, which actually reminds me of the 3 of Cups, actually, even though there's only 2 people on the card. And then follow the moons, watch for signs. So that's very non-astrological. Talk to the moon. But so I'm going to name drop one more house person. Radley Valentine, who's great at Oracle. I call him the Oracle Card King. And he goes, oh, Yasmin, whatever. But he got his deck and he was the first person to say to me it was absolutely accurate. the reading he got, which I was so thrilled about. Actually, you might not like him because he says that the tarot community is really tough on him because he's taken tarot to the masses. I don't know. Some people, he says there are people in the tarot community who are not happy. Are you one of them, Brigit?
No, I experience it because Biddy Tarot is all about bringing tarot into the mainstream. I could experience that little bit of pushback about what are you doing with this mystical art? Well,
right. Well, he's been told that as well, but he's just forged ahead because he knows what he's doing is good and it has a place and it's helping people. But yeah, so he said every time he gets a new deck, he draws a card and he decides if the deck is accurate or not based on that first card draw. And he said that when he took the first one of mine, it was absolutely spot on. And I've had quite a few other people on Facebook say that as well. And what I was going to say was, as a writer, that's a huge relief because there's no way of knowing if what you're creating is going to work. Like tarot, we know it's had thousands of years or hundreds of years of people using it. And, those symbols, especially from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, they're all just embedded in our head, whereas Oracle cards, you're creating a new divination system every time. And it's a big thing and you never know.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. They look absolutely beautiful. When are people able to purchase these?
You can get them on Amazon and all good bookshops. But if I give you a URL, you'll actually get some free bonuses as well.
We've got that moonmessages.com/Biddy gift. If you want to go in the special, very exclusive entryway, the doorway, go to the moonmessages.com/Biddy gift and we'll make sure we post those. And then actually, you also have magic.moonology.com/access intuition, which
yes, I think that works as well.
Oh, that must be into the new deck. Okay, no, I think the first one, the moon messages, is also, you've got a guide around the moon cycles as well. So just make sure, follow both and you'll get some absolutely wonderful treats as you go through. Yes, actually that second one leads to your Moonology messages. And then the first one, the moonmessages.com/Biddy gift, goes to the moon manifesting guide as well. Fantastic. So I just really do appreciate everything that you have shared today. It's amazing. And again, I just really admire and appreciate the way that you express and articulate about the moon cycles. It's so practical, grounded, easy to implement. I'm sure everyone listening is like, oh, I'm going to be doing this straight away, and bringing this into not only our daily spiritual practice, but also think about it, how it can apply in our tarot readings. Even pulling an extra card, like adding in something around the moon cycle, if you're reading for a client, might be, okay, we're in a full moon. What is it that you need to release right now? That might be a little bonus gift that you could offer to somebody based on what you've learned today. So I think there's a lot of magic and potentiality here. So thank you, Yasmin, for sharing that today.
Can I just say, I actually feel like, 200 years ago, anybody who read tarot would have been doing all this stuff. It would all be part and parcel of the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
I think
100%.
I mean, I might be wrong, but I feel like it would be. I was going to ask, what do you guys think of Oracle cards? Because you're all the tarot collective, you're the Biddy tarot people.
Oftentimes people are drawn to tarot through the doorway of Oracle cards, because I find that Oracle cards are probably the easier to consume because you can literally look up card, look it in book, whereas tarot can sometimes feel like this big system that you need to learn and so on. And, we talk a lot about how you can use Oracle alongside of tarot. It's a really nice complement, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
And I can see how, the Moonology cards could work beautifully with tarot and tarot readings.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yasmin, this has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
I've enjoyed it.
I think that you've really lit up our community around what's possible with the moon manifesting. And again, you make it so simple. It's like, yeah, let's go. Let's just start doing this manifesting work with the lunar cycles.
Why wouldn't we?
Yeah, 100%. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time and your energy today, and best wishes with the launch of your new deck. That's super exciting.
Thank you.
Where can people find out more about you?
So yasminboland.com is my website. I do a weekly podcast called the Mainly Moonology Podcast, which you can find on all podcast places. And I'm more active on Facebook than I am on anywhere else. Like that's my go-to. And I'm on there. If you just put in Yasmin Boland Moonology, you'll find me. But I'm also on Instagram, Planet Yasmin Boland, and moonology.com as well.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, so make sure you check out those because you're doing the full moon ceremonies as well. There's lots of goodness.
I'm doing the full moon and new moon ceremonies on Facebook.
Yeah.
And they're free, obviously.
Winner. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you. Bye for now. Hey, if you loved this video, then make sure you check out this next video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you next time.